Hey, welcome back to another edition of Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast. I am Scott Hughes.
And I'm Mike Hawkins, and we're here today with a very special guest, and we're going to dive in just a second. I'll have Chief Hughes introduce our guest, but about sleep, a little bit about wellness, things that are very important. So, Scott, take it away, and if you can introduce our guest here.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm excited to introduce Dr. Leah Kaylor. Dr. Kaylor is a licensed clinical prescribing psychologist for the FBI, and she just released a book that I think is phenomenal, should be a must read. You should buy this right now, hand it out to every one of your police officers, every recruit in the academy, your families, everybody you know. And the book is called If Sleep Were a Drug. So I had the honor of, I guess I had the privilege of listening to Dr. Kaylor on a podcast. And as soon as I got done listening to that podcast, I immediately reached out to her and said, "Hey, Mike and I have to get you on, because if there's one group of people who are sleep deprived, it's cops." Dr. Leah, welcome to the Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast.
Thank you. I think that was the nicest introduction I've ever gotten. So, I'm feeling very excited. And I also feel like I need to give you an affiliate link for all the books we're about to sell. Thank you.
Yes, we'll have a Two Chiefs discount code.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
So, Dr. Leah, you know, I don't want to take away what you're going to talk about, but it's obvious from a leadership perspective as a police chief and someone who's been traveling the country for 13 years now teaching cops. We have a major issue with cops who they go to work tired. They're working tired. They're living their lives tired. We know that directly impacts decision making. We've seen cases where citizens' complaints go up. We've seen car crashes increase. We've seen use of force complaints go up because cops are just tired and they have they're burning at both ends and they're burnout. So, walk us through kind of how does one kind of take an interest in sleep, and we'll just kind of go from there, please.
Yeah. So, how does one begin taking an interest in sleep? Well, I think that there needs to be kind of just a culture shift. And I think that within the general community, it's something that we're seeing. I think that people are interested in sleep. It's becoming a little bit more trendy. I feel like we're seeing it more on social media and other podcasts. But I think within the law enforcement culture, as per usual, we're a little bit behind. So I think that we're still not fully grasping and appreciating how important sleep is. And so that first and foremost is kind of what my goal is, because I think that for most people, you think that sleep might be a really sleepy or boring topic. I think a lot of people think that, whenever you go to turn off the light switch to go to bed, that you're turning off your brain, that you're turning off your body. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. And, we have a lot of people who say this, and, I think that everyone has probably said this at some point, but some people believe it and live by it more so than others of this, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And when you have an attitude like that, that will get you to the grave quicker. It will, like whether you choose to believe it or not. And so when I was structuring the book, I talk about that in the introduction of this I'll sleep when I'm dead attitude, keep pushing, this sleepless hero. This is the badge of honor. And what I decided to do, because I think I'm not above scaring you into getting better sleep, whatever it is that I need to do to get you to a place where you're getting better sleep, that's fine. So, what I like to do is just give people some statistics and information about what it is that your brain and body should be doing at night. And if you're not giving your brain and body that opportunity, how many different ways things can go sideways and kind of just go off of the rail. So, if you like, we can kind of go down that rabbit hole.
That would be perfect, because I think one of the things you're going to talk about are what you should and you shouldn't be doing in the bedroom.
We can go that way too. So I'm going to give you like one of my very favorite statistics or just pieces of information, and then I can go that route. So one of the things that is just so incredibly remarkable, and this is probably my very favorite thing that the brain does during deep sleep, and we cycle through various different stages of sleep each night. So you've probably heard of light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And without getting too deep into that, we cycle through those throughout the night. And you're going to go through 4 to 6 sleep cycles per night. That's typically what an average person does. And we have a lot more deep sleep towards the beginning of the night and a lot more REM sleep towards the tail end of our night. And each of these stages do different things, but then they also do some overlapping things that kind of help each other. But what I'm going to talk about right now happens during deep sleep. And it's just so incredibly remarkable. So, your brain, if you're giving yourself enough time and you're getting into deep sleep, shrinks up, and then cerebral spinal fluid comes up and it gives your brain, I used to call it a brainwash. I now call it a brain car wash. And it goes through and it gets rid of the junk, the gunk, the misfolded proteins, all the crap that's building up, and it takes it away as waste. Now, that should be happening every night. This may not sound spectacular to you, but think about our day to day life. You probably live somewhere where you make trash, you probably put it out on your curb, and a waste management system comes and cleans it up probably once a week. Now, we don't really think about that because that's par for the course. We've been doing this week after week after week. But if for whatever reason the waste management folks didn't come and pick up that trash, we would start to have a lot of problems. And that would look like things are going to stink. It's going to build up. We might have rodent problems. We're going to have health problems because we keep making waste. Now, take that example and shrink it down to the brain. And imagine every day the brain is making debris and waste. And if we're not giving our brain that nightly opportunity to take out the trash, we're going to start to have some issues. Now, again, you might be thinking, whatever, this isn't that important to me. I'm sure, a lot of people do find a lot of fulfillment in their work, but I imagine that a lot of people are looking forward to retirement and moving towards that stage in life where you get to do whatever it is that you want. Everyone is dreaming about what that's going to look like for them. Well, whenever we have these pieces of gunk that are hanging out, they can start to accumulate and kind of pile up. And those pieces of gunk are called beta amyloids and tau's and proteins. And so sometimes whenever I start to talk about this, people kind of a light goes on and I can see that they're like putting two and two together. And I want to be very clear. I'm not saying one causes the other, but I'm saying that poor sleep night after night after night and not allowing your brain to take out the trash sets you up for neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease. So we're working so hard right now. We're grinding it out because at the end of the career, we want that retirement. We want to have fun. We want to be in our right mind and to be able to play with grandchildren or do whatever it is and enjoy that life. But if we are setting our brain health up in such a way where perhaps maybe we're not going to have very good health span or lifespan or longevity or ability to take care of ourselves, that's a real issue. And so that's part of the reason why I think people need to wake up to the power of sleep is that that's just one small example of all the incredible things that your brain and body are doing at night when it may seem like you're just out like a light. In fact, the brain and body are working really, really hard. And so I think that that's just one kind of piece of information that I think people need to be aware of that and again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying one causes the other because there's a lot of dynamic factors as far as genetics and are you exercising? What kind of diet do you have? Things like that. So it's very dynamic, but nonetheless, this can be sleep can be a protective factor if you treat it that way, or you can turn it into a risk factor if you're treating it that way.
So you talk about at night. You said at night a bunch, right? And I know our brains are not supposed to be up at night. And we have a lot of folks who are listening who are probably working night shift. A lot of chiefs are listening who obviously have folks working nights. Not to take you off the path you're headed down, but since you kept saying nights,
Mhm.
what do you tell folks who are stuck working night shift? How do they get the right sleep that you're referring to when your body is telling you, "Hey, the sun's up. You're not supposed to be sleeping right now." What's the workaround there?
Yeah, good question. And you're exactly right. Whenever we think back to our caveman ancestors, because even though we've come very far technology-wise and everything else, our brains and our neural circuitry are still very much the same. So our caveman ancestors knew it was time to wake up when the sun went up, and then they knew it was time to go to bed when the sun went down. And so we're still very much wired that way, even though it's been such a long time ago. So the folks who are kind of doing the opposite, when they are awake when they should be sleeping and they're sleeping when they should be awake just because of biology reasons, we're going to have to work a lot harder. Not to say that it can't happen, but we do have to work a lot harder. So for folks like this, and one of the things, again, I want to get people to a place where they're sleeping better. And I also want to make sure people are very informed about their health. Before I go into tips for sleeping better during the daytime, one of the things I think is really important for people to know is that, again, I'm not saying cause, I'm saying an association. Whenever people are working nights, so again, they're awake when they should be sleeping and they're sleeping when they should be awake, this is throwing off our biology. And this can be a modifiable risk factor for cancer.
Hmm.
So I think that's very
Okay,
important
the
for
C
people to
word.
know.
All right. Well, that just got a bunch
Yes.
of people's ears to
Yeah,
perk
for
up.
cops that are on midnights, and I told you off air, I 13 straight years on midnights, no sleep. I mean, you look at these and you sit there, and we're talking about it now, which is great. But
Yes.
where was this information before, or why wasn't it pushed to people in the academy? I mean, teaching these young kids in the beginning would be essential to get this information.
And that is kind of my mission right now is that, yeah, I'm not sure why we're not talking about it. I'm not sure why sleep isn't as important. We put so much time and effort into exercise and meal prep and this and that. And sleep just kind of always falls to the wayside. And I don't know if it's just because we take it for granted or it's supposed to happen every night. But that's a great question. And that's kind of the mission I'm on, if you will, because, as I said in my book, great sleep shouldn't be top secret. It's not that hard. There are absolutely things that you can do. I don't want to be this fear monger because I've dropped two really big bombs on you so far. And I hate to be that person. But again, I think that it's so important because you only get one brain, you only get one body. You need to be informed to be able to take the best possible care of yourself that you can within the circumstances that you are given.
So, how does sleep deprivation, I'm going to use that word, it may not be the right word.
No, it is.
How does sleep deprivation affect performance and officer safety? And what do we know about it? I alluded to it earlier in the intro
You did.
about decision making and that type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So right at the very kickoff of the podcast, you talked about this. And so one of the things that we know about sleep, okay, so we're only meant to be awake for a certain period of time. Like we have these circadian genes that we are kind of driven by this, where we should be awake for a certain period of time and we should be asleep for a certain period of time. Now, because of the nature of the job, there are times where we need to be pushed. There are times where we need to stay awake and we need to respond to whatever emergency is put in front of us. And the problem is that kind of after a certain point of time, we just decline and we decline very significantly. So I'm going to give the example of being awake for 24 hours because I think that a lot of people can relate to that, whether you're a cop who's listening or, maybe you've got your college age student in the car with you. Like you can relate to probably pulling an all-nighter back in school, things like that. And, we think about it and we think, oh, that's no big deal. Like a little girl at a sleepover could do that. Once we get to a point where we've been awake for so long, and again, I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but we start to behave, we start to act, we start to make judgments as if we are intoxicated. Yes.
Yep. I've heard this
So,
term sleep
Yeah,
intoxication.
that's the norm. Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, yes. And so it is, again, just to kind of like put it in perspective, is if someone showed up to the job drunk, oh, absolutely not. That is 100% unacceptable. Absolutely not. However, and you talked about this at the beginning of the episode, we allow people to show up exhausted and don't think twice about it.
Yep.
Well, if someone showed up drunk, over time, they're going to metabolize that. They're going to sober up. If they show up exhausted and we ask them to work and to push through and keep going and stay afterwards, they're going to get more tired. They're going to get more sleepy. And with that, like you said, it's going to increase the risk of accidents. It's going to increase the risk of just not performing at our best, not putting our best foot forward. That's where we're getting into more aggression and potentially use of force. That's where we're getting into just things that absolutely could be avoided. Mike, earlier before we were recording, you had said, I don't have a whole lot of memory for these particular times. And that's also an issue too, is that sleep is very much tied to memory and our ability to accurately remember things. or even just encode things into our memory. And we're starting to see a lot of issues. And again, it's kind of funny when I ask people this whenever I have a live audience of what does it feel like to be drunk? And everyone's been there at some point in their lives. But our judgment is usually not very good. Maybe we're much more uninhibited than we normally would be. And so when you start to put it in that terms of everyone's been there before, then it's like, oh shit, well, that's not how I want to be on the job. That's not how I want to be representing my police force. And one of the pieces of research that I got when I was putting the book together, and I'm so, so grateful for the person who told me about this study, is that we think we are fine. If we were to take you into a lab and ask you to do various different tasks, the research shows us objectively that you are not fine, that you are, in fact, not performing at your best, and yet you still think that you are. And that's a major, major blind spot for people. And when we continue to do this night after night after night, or day after day after day of being sleep deprived chronically, we start to kind of adapt to this new normal, if you will, of being sleep deprived, of being a lesser self, if you will.
Wow, you just gave me a bunch. So
I'm sorry. Yeah.
no, this is phenomenal stuff. So I want to go back just a little bit. I'm thinking about my role as a police chief, and I'm thinking about
Mhm.
my men and women who are working night shift, and I'm thinking about my staff are on 12-hour shifts, 6P to 6A. They get off at 6 in the morning. They have to be at the courthouse at 9 a.m. They sit in the courthouse from 9 a.m. until noon, and then they take a lunch break, and then they got to be back at 1, and then they find out at 1 o'clock, hey, you got a continuance. You don't have to be here today. So they leave at 1, they go home. It takes them an hour to get home. It's 2 o'clock. They got to be back in at 6 p.m. Their kids get off the bus at 3:30. They get an hour and a half of, I'm not going to say sleep. I don't know what you call it, doctor, but they close their eyes for 90 minutes. And now I'm expecting them to come back in at 1800 and be the best that they can be and make decisions and use the right amount of force and drive the patrol car in the right way and not lose their shit and keep
Right.
keep everything in check. It's like, that's not fair. We would not ask any other profession to do that. Why do we do it to cops?
You're exactly right. You are exactly right. It is, it's not just the job because that is a huge piece of it, but also everyone wants to have that family life or that personal time or just things that they enjoy. Like you shouldn't be the job all the time. You should have other things that make up your identity. And when we are asking someone to push like that and then they're having to try and find time to put all these other things in, let alone sleep is getting like a teeny teeny little piece of this whole pie, it really isn't fair. And it's really, I don't have all the answers. And, this is part of a much longer, much bigger conversation about, funding and staffing and all kinds of things like that. But you're exactly right, because what you just described probably isn't unusual at all for your folks. I mean, I'm sure everybody here who's listening, that was their experience. And now, as
Mhm.
they are chiefs, they're seeing their folks having that experience. And it's just, we're setting ourselves up for failure, to be fully honest.
Well, one
And a lot of those things are our control, right, Scott? As a chief, right, we've got to get the funding, like you said, we've got to get the staffing,
Hmm.
schedule. Outside of that, what tips would you have for first responders, police officers to get a good night's sleep, to refresh, to come into work ready to go? We were about to talk about it earlier, and I know we went in a different path. What tips would you give
Sure.
people?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to try and like give you some big broad strokes, especially because we did talk about people who need to be sleeping in the daytime, and that's super important too. And I don't want those folks to feel left out. So one of the things that I would recommend is just taking a look at your bedroom. And this is something that's going to be very important, right? Like we've probably heard this before of dark, cool, and quiet. That is what we need our bedroom to be. Now, if you're someone who's working nights and you're trying to sleep in the daytime, you have to work even harder because at night, usually it is dark. So we don't have to work super, super hard to block out any light. Yeah, maybe we have some blackout curtains, but in the daytime, we have to work so much harder. So maybe you have blackout films on your windows. Maybe you have like the ultra, ultra dark blackout curtains. Maybe you've got some like Velcro that's making sure that like no extra light is coming in. Maybe you have something underneath your door, like a draft blocker to stop any light from coming in underneath there. Cool. This may sound kind of silly. And again, everybody's got personal preference, but I'm going to tell you what the research says. The research tells us that you're going to get your best sleep in the low 60s. So at nighttime, things kind of naturally cool down. Again, everybody's got personal preference. I see you there. Things cool down. And hopefully you also have like a thermostat or like a fan, whatever
I've got
you've
the
got.
window open even last night here in Michigan with a little bit of snow. The window was still open, a little crack there.
Okay, so it sounds like you're already probably in the in the low 60s, if not even lower than that. But in the daytime, right, whenever it's hot and sunny, depending upon like if the sun is kind of shining into your window, you probably have to work a little bit harder to get that bedroom to cool down to where you need it. Not sponsored. I'm going to give you a hot tip. This is probably my most prized possession. I just moved and I had one two-door Honda Civic that I needed to fill, and that was all I could bring because I did not want to get a moving truck. And I made it a priority to bring my bed, my smart bed. It's called an 8 Sleep, not sponsored, wish I was if you're listening. And basically what it is it's a very fancy fitted sheet that goes over my existing mattress. So you keep your mattress, and then it's got something that looks like a computer tower that goes next to it. You fill that with water, and it can go all the way down to 55 degrees and all the way up to 110.
Oof.
Yes.
Holy
And it
smokes.
learns
What's
you
that called again?
What's it called?
8 Sleep. So the number 8,
Sleep. The number 8 sleep.
it is an investment.
Interesting.
However, you should you should spend a third of your life sleeping. So if you live to be 90, that's 30 years spent sleeping. So just know that an investment in your bed is a good idea. But the reason why I'm telling you this is that you can control it. You can control the temperature completely. If you share your bed with a bed partner, you can each control each side. So that's not an issue because I know that that's often where heads butt with people who share a bed. But what's really cool about it is it starts to learn you night after night after night. So your temperature, your body temperature should drop as you're getting ready to fall asleep. It should fluctuate throughout the night, and then it should start to rise back up when it's time for you to wake up. And that's just kind of how our hormones in our body are set up. So after a couple of weeks, the bed learns you and it has an autopilot feature. So it helps change the temperature throughout the night to keep you asleep. So again, this is very high tech. It is an investment. However, that's what I use to make sure that I'm getting as best sleep as possible. I'm sure there's other technologies, do it old school, open up your window if you are in a cooler environment or have a fan or whatever the case may be.
We're not all in Florida, right?
Well, not everyone can be so lucky. But you know what? The reason why I bought this several years ago when I was living in Pennsylvania. I didn't have air conditioning because 9 months out of the year, it's no big deal. But during June, July, and August, it is a big deal.
Right.
And
right.
everyone has that experience probably of you've had a time where you've been too chilly and it's just too hard to fall asleep. And you've had an experience probably where your air conditioner was broke and it was too hot for you to fall asleep. And both of those are just very uncomfortable. So if we can set the stage for you to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep in a comfortable temperature, that's best. And again, there's all kinds of cool research out there about people who wear like a full like scuba suit to bed, and they can the researchers fully control the temperature of it. And you would not believe how improved people's sleep is when we can control their temperature throughout the night. Now, I don't know that anybody has access to that other than researchers, but I'm just trying to tell you that the science is out there that when we can control our environment, it really does matter and it really can help us fall asleep and stay asleep. And that can really be a game changer for folks.
So the big thing now, even with my kids, electronics, TVs, phones, where does that play into the lack of sleep?
It absolutely does. So blue light, we hear blue light all the time. Okay, but why? Why is that important? Why does that matter? What does that mean? So if you think about it, and this is what I love when I talk to people about sleep is like we hear these things, don't do blue light, but why? And that's what my role is, to tell you the why behind it so that you put the pieces all together and you make informed choices. That's what it's all about. So blue light, the reason why it's a no-no, if you will, is that blue light is the same wavelength as sunlight. Okay, we talked about our caveman ancestors earlier. How did they know when it was time to be awake? The sun came up. And how did they know when it was time to go to sleep? The sun went down. So if we have devices that are emitting blue light and we're holding them very close to our face, our brain, even though we might be laying in bed, we might be feeling sleepy, but if we're holding this device, even if it's down on the lowest setting, that blue light is coming into our eyes and it's telling our brain, well, I thought it was time to go to bed, but the sun is out. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And it confuses the brain and it keeps us awake. But there's a lot more to this story, right? What are you doing with that blue light device, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop? TVs are a little bit different because you should be sitting further away from them. So they're a little less harmless, but still not completely harmless. But nonetheless, oftentimes we have our phones right here, and it may be something on social media that is really sucking in our attention, or maybe it's something that's very upsetting, or maybe it's something that's really fun and funny, or maybe it's games. And no matter what it is, it's likely releasing dopamine.
You're not turning your brain off.
It's not turning your brain off. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite because anything like social media, like games, they are designed to keep you there and to keep drawing you in to stay as long as you can. And that is dopamine. So, dopamine is that motivation to keep going. It's this pleasure hormone. It is like this. I want more. Show me more funny cat videos, or I need to keep going. I need to play to the next round, whatever it is. And so we have this double whammy of we have this blue light coming in and it's telling the brain time to be awake. This is sunlight. And then we also have the dopamine of keep playing. This is fun. I want more. And so it is so hard for sleep to compete because we know there's a million benefits that come with sleeping, but the benefits are not this immediate gratification like dopamine and, playing a game and getting to the next level. So it's very challenging and you have to have some self-discipline. And after a long day, you just want to blow off some steam and you're stressed. It probably feels better to do those distracting activities that are either going to help you blow off steam or help you kind of get distracted for a little while. And so it's hard to have that self-discipline to put it down and to go to sleep because, again, it feels like sleep really doesn't have a whole lot of immediate benefit.
One of the things that I did after listening to you speak, or I read one of your LinkedIn posts, I can't remember where it was, but I made it a point to put the phone into a setting that only my, top 4 or 5 important, quote unquote, people, would
Yes.
get through, and I wouldn't be bothered by text because obviously first responders, a lot of us are subject to 24/7, call outs, things like that. Some of us use our phones for an alarm. And it's funny, like the first couple nights I did it, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss something important. And I had a gentleman on a few weeks ago who talked about the importance of not even getting on your electronics for the first hour after you wake up. And his
Yeah.
point was that whatever's there is going to be waiting on you. Don't get up at 6 in the morning, start checking work emails, because now your brain is thinking about work stuff instead of thinking about getting your kids ready for school and getting, enjoying some you time. You started to talk about it, Dr. Lee, and I just want to take you back to it. And I thought you were going to hit it, and I think I cut you off, which is not uncommon. I apologize. I'm on my wife all the time about not taking sit on her phone in bed, and just
Yes.
scrolling because you said that, the bedroom should be the spot where your brain says, this is where you go to bed. This isn't where you go to watch TV. This isn't where you go to read a book. This isn't where you go to check your phone. Tell our listeners a little bit more about that, if you would.
Scott, you're a good listener.
I hope she's listening.
Listen up. Okay, so you're exactly right. And this is, again, going to be super important for our folks who are also night shift workers and they're sleeping during the daytime. So, what I say is the 3 S's. But let me go back for a second. Before joining the FBI, I was with the VA and I was in their sleep clinic and I would teach veterans how to sleep better. And I used to have a big whiteboard and I would draw a circle and then I would write bed in the middle. And I would ask them, what are you doing in bed? I get all these little chuckles and weird looks and, they want to say something naughty. But people are saying watching TV, talking to my partner, scrolling, eating, paying bills, praying. Like I get all these various different activities that people are telling me. Each time I have the circle bed, I will draw a line off of it and I'll write TV. Or I'll draw a line off of it and I'll write reading. And I keep doing that. And then eventually we get this like very messy spider web of all these various different things we're doing in bed. Well, ironically, a lot of people don't tell me sleep, which is just so interesting and says a lot in
Right.
and of itself. But we'll leave that there. So I ask people, okay, if you're doing all of these activities in bed, how strong is the association between bed and sleep? Well, not very strong
Mhm.
because whenever you go into your bedroom and I get it, right? Like at one point in time, I lived in a shared studio apartment in New York City. So I get it. There are some people listening who this is not a reality for you. And I have tips for you in the book. But for most of us, we do have the luxury of having a separate bedroom. And for that, it's really important that we treat the bedroom as a very sacred space. And that's where the three S's come in. Scott, do you remember what the three S's are? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sex, sleep.
This is a hard one. Sickness.
Sickness. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. So those are the three S's. Those are the three things you should be doing in bed. So sleep, that ought to be happening every night or every day if you're a shift worker. Sex, I don't know what your life looks like. You may be getting lucky, you may be not. And then sickness is kind of like this exception, right? Like if you're not feeling well, if you're fighting something off, listen to your body. There's a reason why when we're feeling sick that we feel a lot more sleepy. It's because your body kind of needs to shut down the non-essential functions to fight back, whatever it's virus or cold, whatever. So those are the three things that should be happening in your bedroom. So but a lot of people, that bedroom is actually a multi-purpose space. So maybe it's where we go to hang out and to relax. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I see one-on-one, and they're like, yeah, when I get home from work, I just hop into bed and I sit there for hours and hours and hours until it's time to go to bed.
That's my
And,
wife. That's my
and
wife.
a lot of people do this. And here's the thing, right? Again, we're confusing the brain. So if we're in there and we're watching TV and we're reading and we're paying bills and we're also eating dinner in bed and we're doing all these things, the brain thinks, well, I have so many options. This is a multi-purpose space. Like I could be productive, I could worry, I could have fun and entertainment. And so it's just confusing, let alone whenever we have a lot of non-essential stuff in the bedroom. So again, if you have the luxury of taking all of your work stuff and putting it somewhere else, like work papers, laptop, books, put those somewhere else. Same thing, if you're keeping like workout equipment or things like that in your bedroom, take that out and put that somewhere else. That does not belong in the bedroom. Again, like if your bedroom is very cluttered and very messy, those are also things that we want to, again, we're just trying to do our best to set up the environment for good conditions for sleep. And everyone's probably going to be listening here, and I hope that they feel very motivated to make change. But one thing I want to say is good sleep does not happen overnight. You could listen to this podcast, you could be so excited, you could go clean up your whole bedroom right now and still have a shit night's sleep. That is okay. Good sleep does not happen overnight. It is these small, teeny tiny changes night after night after night, these baby habits that turn into good sleep. And so I hope that you feel excited to make changes and to do some of the things that we talked about here today. But I also want to say, don't get discouraged.
One quick question, right? Because Scott gave an example earlier of people running around, even having an hour here. What amount of sleep is not worth sleep, or is there an amount that is not worth it? Because you see police officers taking naps, people working, taking quick naps. Is there a time frame that is beneficial or that's harmful?
This is a tricky question, right? Because whenever it comes to law enforcement, you'll hear me talk and you'll hear me say, I am not a proponent of naps. But I want to preface that because when you are putting yourself or anybody else in danger because you are so sleepy, say, for example, behind the wheel or operating heavy equipment or different things like that, all bets are off. Sleep. Go to sleep. However, whenever we're talking about first responders, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Like we can talk about general sleep, and oftentimes I'll talk about the normal, average, healthy sleeper and kind of what that looks like. Say, for example, someone who works at a bank or a library and they're not working overnights. Like that's just not a thing. But I would say, whenever it comes to our first responder population, if they have an opportunity to nap, they probably should be because we don't want to be putting ourselves at risk because of safety issues. So, especially the example that you gave earlier, Scott, of this person kind of just like literally grinding across this like 24-hour period and then being expected to get up and go again. Yeah, I would say get that sleep where you can. So, Mike, to your question there, I don't know that there's an amount of sleep that's not necessarily worth it when we're talking law enforcement and cops, because what we do as a population is so incredibly vital and so incredibly high stakes that I would say sleeping where you can is going to be of the utmost importance, especially when there's just little pockets here and there.
There's a couple things that I do at my department that I think I hope you'll agree are
Okay, let's hear it.
beneficial. Yeah, so the first thing is, while we don't have it in the policy, we do not discourage, to your point, taking I'm going to call it a power nap. Again, might not be the official term, but to your point, I would much rather someone come in and close their eyes for 20, 30, 45 minutes than sit in a parking lot and doze off and get themselves ambushed or hurt, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is,
Fantastic.
and again, I'm not a doctor, so I hope you agree. The second thing that we do that I really think my guys and gals appreciate is I allow them the opportunity to work out on duty. And what I have found, both having done this when I was actually a real cop and patrolled the streets, was that going down and get on the treadmill for, 30, 45 minutes, throwing some weights around, doing something like that, get your heart rate going. For me, and I think hopefully you agree with this, it kind of recharges their batteries and it kind of gets them back out there in a different sense of awareness, in a different state where they feel, hey, okay, it's 3 in the morning. I've come in, I've gotten an hour of cardio. This is going to help me power through those last 3 or 4 hours in my shift. Where I really saw the benefit from was when I'd work all night and then have that court at 9 a.m. I would get a workout in between 7 and 8 or so. And I really feel like that kind of got me through that 9, 10, 11 noon hour ish. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So I love number 1 and I want to level it up for you. So I'm not sure if you've heard about this before. I cannot take credit for this term, nappuccino. Have you heard of the nappuccino? Let me
No,
Not
let
no, I
me
can't wait
introduce you
though.
to the nappuccino. So, the research out there shows that naps can be beneficial, and then it also shows us that caffeine can be beneficial. So, there's some research out there to show that if you combine these, they can be more effective than just one or the other alone. So, with a nappuccino, what we would do is have an amount of caffeine. So, say, for example, like an espresso, cappuccino, something along those lines, and then immediately take a nap. And this is, again, whenever someone has just a short period of time. Maybe they only have 20 minutes for a nap. So by the time that they take this 20-minute nap, the effects of caffeine should be starting to kick in at that point and when their nap is over. And so we can kind of supercharge it a little bit by having the caffeine, the nap, and then once you wake up, if you can kind of splash some really cold water on your face, on your hands, get a little bit of movement, get light in whatever capacity you can, that's going to kind of give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Take a shot of espresso and then take a 20-minute nap. That doesn't even make sense to us ignorant
you don't
folks
have a
called
doctorate degree,
cops, but
Scott.
I don't have
Yeah,
DR in
no.
front of my name. That is phenomenal. I'd never heard of that.
That's the nappuccino for you.
The Napa. I thought you were going to say something that came out of Napa, California. I didn't know where you were going with that. There was a department out west. Speaking about West, there was a department out west who I won't name the department because I haven't looked this up in a number of years. But they had a program called the Restorative Rest Program, and Cliff Notes version is that they were basically allowed to take a power nap, and they were allowed to on duty. They had like 3 or 4 locations around the city they could actually go and close their eyes for 45 minutes or so, and then
That's
go back out on
phenomenal.
patrol.
And I
So
think
so yep,
if
go
you
ahead,
were to
go ahead.
do some research studies along the lines of that, like that type of department and that type of policy versus a department that, frowns upon that or doesn't allow that at all or doesn't I can imagine that there could be, you could look at a lot of different things as far as injuries, as far as use of force, as far like a lot of different things, aggression measures, and see that I imagine the folks who do get the opportunity to nap and can take advantage of that, that they're probably doing significantly better.
Well, yeah, and I think as a chief, I think we owe it to our people to make sure that we're giving them everything we can to keep them safe and keep them alive. And it's not just making sure they have the right equipment. It's, are we taking care of them personally, right? I don't want to get into the whole recruitment and retention side of the house, but being able to work out on duty, being able to take an unofficial power nap if you need it, being able to have systems in place to help kind of combat this, I do think goes a long way with selling your agency or showing your people, that you care about them. So one more thing, I know we're going to run out of time here soon, but one question is, I think there's going to be a lot of folks who, well, I hope not. I can't quantify that. There may be some folks who are like, suck it up. I think you said that earlier. Suck it up, kid. It's what you get paid. You don't get paid to sleep, work out on duty. Whenever I talk about working out on duty, the number one pushback I get from leaders across the country is, well, if they get hurt, isn't that workers' comp? Yes, probably 100%. But if they go out here and get killed or kill somebody else because they wrecked or fell asleep, we have another problem on our hands. So I think it's so some people just find a quick way to say no as opposed to trying to find a way to say yes. But this whole sleep thing, and it got me thinking about, the expert witness work I do defending cops and use of force and things, is like how much of these cases, or excuse me, how many of these cases, if we could ever prove it, we could maybe take back to they were tired, they were
Yes.
agitated. And as a boss, like, you have, to your point, you wouldn't let a guy show up to work drunk. So if a guy shows up to work and he or she has been up all night, they had court all day, their kid got off the bus, they're that example I gave earlier. One of the questions to think about that we're not going to answer right now in this podcast is what do you do with them?
Hmm.
Real quick outside the box, I'm thinking, well, maybe I pair him up with somebody else. Maybe I ride with him as the sergeant. Maybe I cover their shift and send them home, make them burn some time off because they're probably not in the right frame of mind. And I think too many agencies still operate under, well, it hasn't happened to us, and we'll just cross our fingers and hope it doesn't happen. And our good friend Gordon Graham says predictable is preventable. So, it's probably just a matter of time. And, I certainly don't want to deal with that, which is why I try to be innovative and outside the box and have
Yeah.
folks like you come on here and talk about it. So, Mike, were you going to
So,
say something? Sorry.
no, I was going to say, Doctor, we appreciate you coming on. If there was one thing that you wanted to say to first responders before we end, and then maybe also tell people where to get this book, then we can wrap up.
Sure. So if there's only one thing that I could tell you, I'm going to give you like the tiniest little cliff note story. So when I started at the FBI, I had a supervisor who used to talk about the three pillars of wellness, and she would talk about sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And as I look back on that, 6 years later, I think, oh no, she had it wrong. I think sleep is the foundation for everything. And then you can build upon it what you want. And Scott, that kind of goes to your point of like, oh, well, what about this equipment? Like this high tech, this and that? You can have all those things. If you don't have sleep, everything's going to fall apart. It's like having a faulty foundation. Like you're going to get a sinkhole, it's going to collapse. And so we need to prioritize sleep. And I hope that what you heard here today is just a teeny, teeny part of all the education and all the information that I have to share and the ways that I help people get better sleep. So if you'd like to get a copy of the book, If Sleep Were a Drug, it is on Amazon. It's now an Audible, so you can listen if that's your jam. And my name is Dr. Leah Kaylor. You can find me at my website, and I have social media. I'm super active on LinkedIn, so friend me there if that's what you call that.
If speaking of friends, a friend of mine who owns a gym compares working out at the gym to this analogy. And it fits with what you just said. If you were only given one car your entire life, how well would you take care of that car? Oil changes, rotate the tires, fix the belts. You said earlier you spend a third of your life sleeping. So we should be approaching sleep the same way, right? You only get one car, one life. Take care of yourself and live for that retirement. When you start throwing out dementia and cancer, that perks up everybody's ears, right? And that should get everybody's attention listening. We all think in this job we're bulletproof and
Hmm.
it's never going to happen to us. Not to end on a depressing note, but how many times have you seen the stories where folks retire with 6 months, you're going to their funeral?
Wheels fall off. Yeah. You have to start thinking about that now because you're probably thinking about it as far as the boat and the this and the that and the free time and how much you're going to enjoy it. You also think you need to think about how you're going to get there and how you're going to support yourself to that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Leah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Scott, any last words to take us home tonight, and we'll get out of here.
No, this has been awesome. Check out the book, If Sleep Were a Drug. It's phenomenal. Buy it for everybody. I buy every one of my cops a book for Christmas, and I think I just figured out which book I'm going to buy them this year. So keep up the good work, Dr. Lee. It's awesome. Great work.
Thank you guys. This was awesome.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Appreciate it.